I'm with Malcolm Palmer. Welcome to the Life in Recovery podcast, Malk.
Hiya, John.
Nice to see you as always.
Yeah, good to see you as well, mate.
And you're a member of Alcoholics Anonymous and quite a few of my local meetings. That's how we know each other. And, I'm obviously aware that you've been sober for 36 years, which is an amazing feat in itself. So I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you and hearing your story kind of in depth as to what it was like, obviously, like what your upbringing was like and what your alcoholism was like, and how life has changed since you got sober, and what your life has been like in recovering. There's a long period of time to cover there. So kind of starting off right at the very beginning, what was it like when you were growing up?
Oh, as a kid, I had quite a good life, one of two children, and the oldest of two. So I kind of there's an 8 year gap between myself and my sister, and I kind of got spoiled. I was a little bit of a brat, a bit of a spoiled brat. Um, Junior school, I was kind of I wanted to be the top of the tree. I always wanted to be the top of the tree, and kind of a bit of a bully, I suppose, as well, in a way, which I don't say with any pride, but that's just the way my ego flowed at the time. It was kind of, and I was always around alcohol from a very young age. My dad was a pianist, and he played in a lot of clubs and pubs, and had little bands going and things like that. So every Saturday night, at the very least, we were at a club, the social club, just with dad on the piano, and there's a lot of beer around, a lot of booze around. Not at home, never at home. There was never any booze in the house. It was always kind of socially, um, but there was always that opportunity to swipe a sip out of somebody's glass, and my dad's mates would say, "Oh, do you want a drop of this, Mark? And a drop of that." You know what I mean? And I kind of suppose I got a little bit of a taste for it at that time. Dad was a bit authoritarian. He wasn't. He didn't beat me. He wasn't physically abusive, but he was strict. He was very strict, and he knew what he wanted for me, and where he wanted me to go. He had his own business in town. He had his own saddlery business, and um, I don't think he really wanted me to follow that kind of line. I think he wanted me to be better than that, and to kind of do the university thing and all the rest of it. Um, but I left junior school, and went to the local grammar school. After some additional coaching, and oh, you've got to get your writing's got to be better, and your maths has got to be better, and all this. And I passed my 11 plus and went to the local grammar school. And on day one, I got into a fight. Because me, with my ego, top of the tree from the school that I came from, you know what I mean? And going into this new environment, and I lost the fight, and from there on in, for the next 5 years, I was the year punch bag. I was the one who kind of copped for it. My confidence was just literally nosedive, and I mean nosedive. And I suppose it was from kind of that point onwards where I needed an escape, because I certainly didn't want to go to school on a daily basis, especially the further I got into it. Um, Drink at that point wasn't really kind of a major player, but it wasn't that far off. You know what I mean? I knew it was there, and I was still able to access it. Um, and by the time I was 13, I was certainly drinking a bottle of cider a night, and just trying to get away from everything, out with my friends. And I use the term very loosely, but kids I used to knock about with, yeah, out with them, sort of nightly, bugger the homework and all that sort of stuff. But I also, um, I play drums, as you know, and around about 13, 14, I started to get into my own bands, and started to get into bands where we were playing in clubs and pubs and things like that. Um, and of course, this kind of 14-year-old in that environment with a taste for the booze, it's it's a win-win situation, isn't it? It's also a recipe for disaster. Um, but it was my escape from the emotional and the physical, you know, abuse that I was getting on a daily basis, from school and outside of school with the friends that I used to knock about with, because I became very much a people pleaser. Where I'd gone from being not having to be a people pleaser because I was the one that people wanted to please. I'd then gone into this environment which totally turned it on its head, and I very much became a people pleaser, and that opened the gates for so much abuse of all kinds, physical, psychological, sexual. It was the kind of the theme for my teens, really. That and the booze was where I went to escape. The booze and the music was where I went to escape. And I can certainly say by the age of 18, I was drinking alcoholically, without a shadow of a doubt. Looking back on it, certainly at 18, I was at a stage where I couldn't really go through a day without having a drink. I left school at 16. I got out of there as soon as I could. Um, the bullying, they found out about the bullying in my last year, and they actually offered me the chance to stay on for an extra year and redo all my exams and everything. And I basically told them to stick it where the sun don't shine and walked away. And I can remember walking down the road with one of the lads on the last day, and I've got a pocket full of pencils, and I just literally broke all the pencils in half and threw them over my shoulders and said, "That's it." And I took the easy route. I took the easy route and went into the family business. You know, um, was it the right thing to do at the time? Yeah, it was the route that I wanted to take. Um, Again, Dad tried to kind of persuade me to not follow that route, but me being the egotistical little shit that I was, I wasn't going to listen to any of it. I was going to be, you know, I was going to be a wealthy saddle maker. um, so yeah, I went into the saddle. I did try a couple of other things. Tried being a mechanic for a couple of years, and always kind of gravitated back to the saddlery side of things. But the drinking just kind of as is the common story, really, it just got progressively worse and worse and worse. And couple of failed relationships, the first love and the broken heart and all that. I met my first wife when I was about 18. It was a rebound job, but I was pissed, and I don't, and she was all right. She was lovely, she was beautiful, gorgeous blue eyes and lovely figure and all the rest of it. Um, and we got married probably when I was about 21. Um, but the day we got married, I don't remember. I have no recollection of getting. Well, I do. I, I I remember the morning with my cousin, who was my best man. We got married at 3 o'clock, something like that, in Brownhill. And I remember up until the point where we'd been to the pub and had a couple of pints, and we'd gone over to the little offie just over the road and bought half a bottle of whiskey. Because it was a special, because I could. Um, and then after that, I can't remember anything. I just cannot remember. The only recollection I've got of my wedding day is what I see in the photo. That's it. Um, and so that's kind of how bad it was at that time. I was 21. 23, 24. I had my first son. Um, Bless him. But the relationship, my wife, bless her, and I'll always be grateful to her because she stuck by me. despite the shit. And thankfully, I was never physically abusive towards her. But you know that's the emotional abuse, I suppose, I gave her, and the verbal abuse, you know, just kind of made up for that. And you know, and we get on well. We're still friends now, and you know, we get on well. Um, and then Carl came along at about 24, but the drinking just carried on. I just continued to just do what I was doing. And during my 20s, I got banned from driving twice. I got put into jail for drink driving. And even that didn't kind of push me into getting recovery. Family were all trying to get me help, and they sent me to see psychiatrists. We've heard the stories so many times, haven't we? But I was having none of it. I tried AA once when in my early 20s, 21, 22. But it was lip service. You know, I wasn't there for any other reason than to shut people up. You know, just wanted them to keep quiet and just get off my back. And I didn't really want anything to do with AA. Although I love the people that I tell them that, you know, I've got a bottle of cider in the car for when the meeting finished, you know, for when I got home. Because I didn't stop drinking. I cut it down a little bit, but I didn't stop. And like I say, there's always a bottle of cider or something in the car for when the meeting had finished. And I did that for about 6 months. And I met some lovely people who I was to meet again a little bit further down the line. And the stories, you know, the stories are very similar to most everybody else's. You know, that deterioration in health and mental well-being and all that sort of stuff. And I was a functioning alcoholic, so I was always kind of topping up. I'd always got a level of alcohol in my system, which allowed me to function during the day. And strangely enough, I did most of my drinking at work. And I'd have a few tinnies during the day just to keep me topped up. But then when the lads all went home, I'd stay at work till 10, 11 o'clock at night, and I'd just have a beano. I'd work, you know, because I've got to earn the money to pay the bill at the end of the week. So there was a means to an end. But it was just carte blanche. Once everybody gone home, then I was round the off license, which was what 200 yards round the corner. You know, I got a tab, so I could go and get what I wanted, pay it up at the end of the week, and it was as simple as that. And you know, I'd have people in the factory, you know, good, nice, well, all good people, but some people you probably wouldn't associate with if you were thinking straight. Let's put it that way. And that went on for a few more years. You know, the downward spiral was ridiculous. And as I say, mum and my grandma and you know my wife at the time all tried to get me help with certain you know people. And I'd got a routine. I'd lost my license, so I I'd get up, go out to work, and I'd walk to work. And I knew on the way to work whether there was an off license that I could get a drink at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I'd go and get my stash for the day, put it into my briefcase. Sounds very grand, doesn't it? um, but I put the cans in my briefcase. I go over the road and get a copy of the Daily Mirror, and then walk down the canal. And then halfway down the canal, I'd sit on my briefcase, get my mirror out, and have a can before I got to work, thinking nobody could see me, thinking it was all, I was invisible to everybody. But the comical part about this was, you'd think, guy with a briefcase, yeah, yeah. But I was dressed in double denim. You know what I mean?
Like a Midlands cowboy.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, yeah. With the rhinestones and everything, mate. I tell you. Um, and it must have been such a sight, see this geezer walking down in denim jacket, denim, jeans, and a briefcase. It just, but that was my routine. Walk down the cut, down the canal, to work, and then put all the tins in my drawer, and then at 9 o'clock, you could probably time time it around about 9 o'clock. I'd need a top up, so I go down to the office and open a can and never. And the one day I'd gone through this routine, and there was a voice in my head, and to this day I don't know where it came from, and I never forget what it says. It said, this voice said, "This is not the way you should be living." That's exactly what it said. This is not the way you should be living. And at that point, I picked up the phone and I asked for help. And that was on February the 3rd, 1988. And I haven't had a drink since that day. That evening, I was admitted to a treatment centre. And I haven't had a drink since that day. It's just the weirdest thing. The weirdest thing.
Who did you ring?
The treatment centre that they've been trying to get me into, because that's where my psychiatrist worked. That's where he was based. So I rang them. And through that treatment centre, it was an AA-based program. So we do 2 meetings a week. So that was my reintroduction to AA. And this time, I wanted it.
What was
I wanted.
when you said that you heard a voice? Was it a voice that was separate to your, like, was it a different sound to your own voice?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It was somebody outside of my sphere telling me something. It was a spiritual experience. It's my first spiritual experience,
Yeah.
and it was my reaction to it. The kind of, when I look back at it, I've grown so much spiritually over the last 36 years. So I understand a lot more about spirituality now than I ever did. And I look back, but it was my reaction to it that is the astounding bit. Because up until that point, I didn't want to stop drinking. Up until that point, I really didn't want to stop drinking. I wasn't prepared to accept that I was an alcoholic. Up until that point. At that point, that something changed in my head. Something changed in my psyche. And like I said, I drank up until the point where they came to pick me up from work to take me in, which was about 8 o'clock on the evening. And after that point, I haven't had a drink. And that is in itself a miracle, because I couldn't go. I've gone 36 years. I couldn't go 36 hours. I couldn't go 36 minutes, if the truth,
Do you do
without
you do you,
coming to
do
clean
you
up.
assign that to divine intervention then?
Oh yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah, absolutely. No question about that whatsoever. I have no doubts that was my higher power, telling me that the time was right for me to do something about my problem. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. So
Why do you think that that happens for some people and it doesn't happen for others? Because it's like a question of that I ponder quite often. Because I mean I had a similar situation when I stopped drinking, and like mine was instant like yours. It was like the decision. I made a decision that I wasn't going to drink anymore. I prayed. Well, I prayed, and I asked for help, and then I've never had a drink ever since. And I was the same as you, like I couldn't give up drinking on my own and then go from being addicted to it one day, and then the next day, it's the obsession for it and the compulsion for it had completely been lifted. Um, but that doesn't happen for everybody, and what's your understanding like of as to why that is, if you have any or any thoughts on it?
That's a good question actually, because I hadn't really kind of looked at it from that perspective before. And I suppose that the honest answer is I don't know. Um, because that day was no different to any other day that had gone previously. As I said, my routine was the same, everything was the same. Um, and like you know, I've been coming off and feeling like shit, and you know, kind of the DTs and all that sort of stuff. And then that was my only kind of sort of prayer time, was when I was saying, "Oh God, please, you know, stop, help me stop. 'Cause I won't do it again. I won't do it again." And then 24 hours later, I'm doing it again.
Yeah.
You know, but um, but the day itself, I don't think was any different to any other day um that I've gone through my routine. It's just that that particular moment, that voice in my head just was clearer, I suppose. Um, I don't know, John. Is the honest answer. I have no real honest kind of answer to that, because it just appeared. It just came from nowhere. It just came out of nowhere. So maybe if if I kind of try to analyze it a little bit, I know that my higher power, you know, or the power that kind of guides me is constantly there. Maybe they thought that was the day.
Mm,
Maybe they thought that that was the time,
mm.
and that I was kind of for some reason going to be more receptive to it on that point than any other. I don't know,
Or
but I know it worked.
maybe in addition to that as well, maybe because I mean, ultimately, the point of getting sober and recovering is that we then help others, don't we? And maybe
Yeah.
that you've had sufficient enough pain and punishment, and you know, in order to be able to help others in a way that was right for you. You know, like
Mm.
you've then got your story, haven't you, to tell to others?
Yeah. Yeah, and I certainly was kind of very much the cliche. I was sick of being sick. I was, you know, I knew, you know, I'd had enough. Um, but maybe my mind was more open on that particular day to receiving whatever it was I received, you know,
Mm,
rather than. And I do believe that that kind of open. You've heard me say this in meetings. You've heard me kind of talk about open-mindedness in meetings. I think that open-mindedness to what we get is vitally important,
yeah.
because if we start to kind of block our thinking, then we're not going to receive what we need to receive. And I get things on a daily basis, you know, where you know, they're just little things sometimes, bigger things other days, but just small things, you know, through some strange mediums. It might just be a song that comes on the radio, or, you know, something that I see or read in a newspaper or a magazine or something like that. But my mind is all more open and receptive to these kind of little signals now than it's ever been. And that's through this program. That's only through, you know, doing or working this program to the best of my ability.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard something really interesting the other day. Actually, it was said it was something along the lines of that emotions are the language of the soul, and that really hit me because I was like, when I was drinking and in the madness, I was completely dead to my emotions. Like my emotion, I was cut off from my emotions completely. And that was the whole point of me drinking was to completely numb myself from my emotions. So
Yeah,
I never had that language going on inside me really because it was always avoided or numbed or And then when I got sober, you know, they say, don't you, you know, that you get your feelings back. And it's like a whole new language that you have to learn, because you know, you then have to become ready to um, learn that language of your emotions, language of the heart, I think was what Bill Wilson called it, but it's the same thing for me.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely, mate. I buried my emotions under a brewery. You know, you know, yeah, they were buried very, very deep.
Yeah,
You know, I had no emotions. I was very much emotionless.
yeah,
And I've just been kind of thinking about that particular day, and I think maybe I think I'd had an appointment with my psychiatrist the week before, so maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know, but yeah, from the emotions point of view, yeah, as I say, mine were long gone, long gone. Um, the only emotion I had realistically was uh, the one I showed when I couldn't get a drink, or I wasn't able to get a drink,
yeah,
and that didn't happen very often because um, me being, you know, cunning and all the rest of it, I knew where to get a drink more or less 24 hours a day. You know, I knew the pubs that did lock-ins. I knew the off licenses that opened early so that they could serve the sandwiches to the local factory units. So, you know, I slept if I needed 3 hours sleep a day, I could get booze the other 21 hours of that, 24 hours a day.
yeah.
You know, so um,
So you went to
it,
the
I
oh, sorry, go on.
that's all right, mate. No, no, I was just going to say, I'm kind of going back into the day where drinking hours in those days were restricted to 11 till 2 and sort of 6 till 11. So after those hours, you couldn't really get a drink. And the worst day of of, of the year was Good Friday, because all the offices were shut on Good Friday. It was an awful day. Yeah, a lot of planning went into it. Yeah.
The
But yeah, go on, sorry, mate. Yeah,
worst day for the alcoholic.
yeah, 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 yeah. In them days, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, so on the day that you know, you had your last drink and then you went to the rehab, what happened from there?
Um, I became willing, honest, and as I've said, open-minded. And the biggest thing that I did was I accepted this label of alcoholic. You know, it it it's that acceptance for me that changed things for me. Because once I could accept that I suffer from this bitch of an illness, um, I can then do something about it. You know, it you can see it however you want. You can accept it as an illness. You can see it as a label. You can see it as whatever you want. But if you're prepared to take that on board, then you can start to do something about it. And I think at that point, I think once I'd walked through the doors of that treatment centre, I realised then that, yeah, this was when I started to accept, yeah, I've got a problem, you know, and maybe this is the point where I start to do something about it. And it's that honesty, that willingness, and that open-mindedness that kind of it all fell into place from that point. Yeah, it was. You know, I'm not saying it was easy. I'm not. You know, it was a bit of a. I can't say traumatic, but it was. It was kind of. It revealed a lot of me to me, I suppose. And you spoke about emotions, John. I suppose that's when the door got unlocked to where I'd locked away all my emotions. And the biggest thing that happened in the 5 weeks that I was in there was I did my initial step 4 in there, and I got rid of some stuff that day that I'd never spoken to anybody about. I'd never ever spoken to anybody about. And the weight that that lifted was unbelievable. And I carried that for, I was 29. I probably carried that for about 15 years without ever offloading it to anybody, and ever kind of telling anybody about it. So to offload it in a room full of complete strangers was unique in my life. I've never done that before. But the release I felt from that, I think, just opened the floodgates then to me accepting everything that they could throw at me. I was
Yeah,
on a pink cloud for 2 or 3 days after. I was up there somewhere. But the problem about being up there is, as you know, you've got to come down.
yeah,
But I was in an environment where that kind of come down was managed, I suppose. It's not the first time that I've seen it, and I don't suppose it'll be the last. But for me, it was one of the best experiences I've ever had. And what I share in the meetings, about walking around carrying this bag around your neck and filling it full of rocks. You know, it just gets to a point where it's that heavy you can't carry it anymore. So you got two choices. You either let it drag you under, or you get rid of the rocks. And that for me is what I did. That step four and I suppose step five was allowing me to empty the bag of the rocks. But that kind of leads me a little bit into this program, and that is the beauty of this program, because I hear a lot of, I've done step four, I've done step five, I've done. I've never done a step four. I've never done step five. I've never done step 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 1, 2, 3, whatever. I'm still doing them. I'm continually doing them. So when I hear that, oh, I've done step four, yeah, you've done one part of it. You've done the opening part of it, or you've done a part of it. But for me, that doesn't stop, because at the end of the day, me being me being a slightly abnormal human being, I keep putting rocks in the bag. Once I've emptied it, I start filling it up again. So at some point, I've got to get rid of it, and that's what this program is. It's about getting rid of those rocks and being able to move through life with the load as light as it possibly can be, and for the you know for the hassle that brings you to be as little as it possibly can be. Um,
it's,
I
it's,
don't ever. Sorry, mate. Go on.
I was just going to say that it, I just want to labor on this point for a minute because for me, it is so massively important. Those two steps. Like, I think it's what sets the 12 steps apart from every other spiritual program because over the years, I mean, since I got sober and, even up until today, I still do as much research as I possibly can into other programs and counseling and psychotherapy and Buddhism and all this, and it all it's so apparent to me that the difference between everything else out there and the 12 steps is step 4 and 5. It's so huge, like what you just described there about the relief that it gave you to share, get rid of the rocks out of the bag. um I had exactly the same experience, and it's like unparalleled. If people don't do that, like I know loads of people that have like stopped drinking, stopped taking drugs, and they're like they're into other things, which is fantastic, and like they're living much better lives, but they've still got that stuff, because they've never had gone through the process of offloading it. So yeah, I
Yeah,
just think it's that like it's just it's something that you can't describe how amazing the experience is of doing a step 4 and a step 5. And And I totally agree with you as well. It's something that you don't just do once. You've got to keep doing
No,
it and doing it and doing it, like
no.
for the rest of your life.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, mate. Yeah. Um, the thing about it is, I'm an alcoholic, and I'm a very fortunate alcoholic because I've got a program, and as you rightly said, I think that sort of differentiates this from other things that are out there. Um, I am a very fortunate alcoholic because I've got that program to kind of guide me through life. Um, but I'm also a human being, and I've still got character defects. I've still got things that I do wrong and I get wrong and all the rest of it. So that bag does get filled up. That kind of that bag gets filled up sometimes a lot quicker than others. So my step 4 process is dependent on how things have been this last month, this last couple of months. Um, have I had a good month where I haven't put too many rocks in the bag? Still want to get rid of them, and that's where my sponsor comes in. That's where my sponsor, is my biggest asset because he's the guy I'll sit down with and say, you know, this has happened, that's happened, I've done this, I cocked up here, I've dropped a clanger there, you know, maybe I shouldn't have said this to somebody, do you know what I mean? They might only be small things, but 10 small things make one big thing.
Yeah,
And the sooner I get rid of them, I'm getting rid of that one big thing,
yeah,
which could be the one big thing that drags me under,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, 100%. Well, I mean, like you said, know, we do change, and I'm sure over the long amount of time that you've been sober, you've changed a lot. But I've quickly revert to type and to my default if I'm not looking after myself properly.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh God, yeah, yeah, yeah. I can be a right arsehole if I can be a right cranky get, you know. If I ain't doing what I'm supposed to be doing, if I just veer off it for a little bit, if I kind of lose sight of it, and it happens, the fact that I've got such a length of sobriety doesn't mean to say that I'm perfect and that I don't veer off at times, and I don't kind of go off piste at times, because I do,
Mm.
you know, because I'm human.
Yeah,
And I think we have to remember that as alcoholics, yeah, we're privileged, especially in the position that we're in, because we've got this amazing program and this amazing fellowship that we can call on at any time to kind of help us through whatever life throws at us. And it throws some heavy punches sometimes, you know. And we've got this amazing toolkit, as people call it, or whatever, to kind of call on. But we're still human beings at the end of the day, and we're still susceptible to human frailties. Sometimes not of our own doing, because we're in a world where we're the minority who have got that program, but we're surrounded by people who haven't got that program and don't understand that way of living and that kind of 24-hour a day concept, if you like, and living one day at a time. Um, you know, because we've had the conversation about it, that my son with his mental health issues, he's a prime example of people not having a program because he projects, you know, the outcome of something is going to be the worst that it can ever be. It never has been, and God willing, it never will be. But in his head, he's the outcome of whatever that situation is the worst. And all that, and unless he kind of takes on board what I'm trying to give him from my perspective, then he'll carry on with his head mashed up. Thankfully, but again, divine intervention, higher power, and all that. He's in a much better place now than he's been for a long, long time, and I thank God for that. But by God, could he benefit from having a program? and so many other people that I see around me, people at work, people in my social lives, they could do with what I've got, and I would love to give it them, but you know they they're not open minded enough to accept it sometimes.
Well, they're not, and you know what's really interesting? There is actually because my wife went through a really rough period a couple of years ago, and as a result, like we had a conversation, and I was saying some similar stuff to you. I was saying like you could really do with something like what I've got because obviously, you're not an alcoholic, but you've got similar kind of traits with the anxiety and depression and stuff, and um. She found a fellowship called Emotions Anonymous EA, which I'd never even heard of. It
Oh,
was
right.
completely new to me. And she's part of that fellowship now, and it's really, really helped her. And the irony of it was, the first book I ever wrote years ago, like God, probably 8, 9 years ago now, was called Addiction Prevention, and I was talking in the book about, how it would be amazing if we taught kids in schools the 12 steps, but
Mm,
rather than powerless over alcohol, just powerless over people, places, and things, and
mhm,
just introduce them to this idea of being able to hand it over and doing all the things, like doing an inventory, praying and meditating, helping others, like basically the basic tenets of the 12 step um, program could be applicable to anybody, obviously. And
yeah.
and it would help anybody that learnt them. So that was my whole premise of this book. And at the end of the book, I wrote like the last chapter was, I really wish that there was a program out there for people, or I'd love to kind of like be involved in the development of a program. And it turns out that there is this program out there. So it's a shame, really, that more people don't know about it because, and I mean, the problem is that, like, and I'm not doing your son's thinking for him, but unless he actually reaches a place where he desperately needs it, he's never actually gonna try it, is he? That's the only
No,
problem with these things is that
no,
we would have never have gone to AA had our drinking been okay, and just occasionally it was
yeah,
shit. We'd have never have gone to AA.
no, absolutely not. Of course, and you have to kind of reach that place, as we call it, the stepping off place, isn't it? It's where we get off the train.
Yeah,
And thankfully we got off the train early enough for it to kind of help us to recover. But yeah, it's down to his rock bottom, I suppose, at the end of the day. And I pray that he doesn't reach that. I pray that he doesn't get to that point.
yeah,
But if he does, then there'll be ways and means of helping him. But it's just it what it the two things that this program has done for me that I think are kind of paramount in my recovery is that spiritual journey that it's taken me on. I love the spiritual side of this program. I absolutely love it, you know, and I'm really kind of looking into it a lot more. The kind of older I get, the more I look into it, and the more I kind of deep dive it, if you like. But also that kind of CBT side of it, the cognitive behavioral therapy kind of side of it, where it changes my thinking. My thinking now is different to how it was 2 years ago, and it's certainly different to how it was 10 years ago, and it absolutely is totally different to how it was 36 years ago. And then again, that is something that I really enjoy because I love talking to people like you, and listening to new ideas and different viewpoints and different avenues that can be explored. That's that thinking journey is part of my spiritual journey because when I speak to people like you and people that have been around for some time and not necessarily for a long time, somebody might have been about 6 months, but they might have come across something that I've never heard of. And I think, well, let's have a look at that. You mentioned Buddhism. I love, I love kind of reading about Buddhism and that kind of mindset and all that kind of thing. Um, So I think for me, what this kind of fellowship does is it broadens my mind, it broadens my outlook, but then it opens all these doors to the spirituality of life.
Mm,
And I don't think there's a better way of living than having a spiritual life, And as it says, I ain't looking for spiritual perfection,
mm.
just progress. And I'm sorry to quote I'm sorry to kind of be a bit cliche and quote the book, but that's what I'm looking for, that spiritual progress. And that is the bit of this program now that I love, because I can kind of focus on that.
I mean,
And that
the thing I love about AA in the literature is that it is all very, it's, well, I mean, I can't find any fault with it, basically. Like, it's, as far as I'm concerned, everything that was written in that book is true. And, well, there's only one thing, I'll get to that, and it gets to one thing I have a bit of an issue with in a second, but the, the idea, basically the way I look at the big book is that, they took um, all the spiritual and religious knowledge available to them at that time and boiled it down into this program that, as I said earlier, could work for anybody. It just so happened that, it was alcoholics who first kind of stumbled upon the idea of one alcoholic talking to another, and then Bill and Bob started to integrate this idea of the 12 steps via the Oxford groups and stuff. But I just think it's an amazing program. Like, I think, the two, there's two things that I have it's not an issue, but now in the year 2024, I think that the word God can be a stumbling block for a lot of people. And I think that it was a mistake for them to use the word God when they could have just used the words higher power all the way through the book. Because ultimately, they are saying the higher power can be anything that you want it to be. It doesn't necessarily have, it can be a religious God if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be. And even at a basic starting point, it can just be the group, which I think is
Yeah,
genius,
yeah,
like absolute genius. And I just think that they should have just stuck to the words higher power because it's not as loaded as the word God. And the only other
yeah,
issue, the only other tiny issue that I have as well is that the doctor's opinion. So obviously the doctor, and it was just his opinion, but he said that the effect of alcohol on the alcoholic is like an allergy. And the only slight problem with that is that there is actually an allergy to alcohol. Like there's like a very, very minute number of people in the world, probably like less than 1% of the world's population, who do have an allergy to alcohol, that when they put alcohol in the system, it has the same effect as peanuts. So it gives them anaphylactic shock and
mm,
basically kill them. And if you think about like alcohol in terms of like an allergy, like if you've got a peanut allergy, for example, you would never eat a peanut ever again. Whereas
yeah,
if you've got if they're saying that it's like an allergy, so therefore if you put alcohol in your system and it nearly killed you, obviously you wouldn't go near it. So it's just, I think I've always found that a little bit confusing. So I never say I've got an allergy to alcohol. I say I have an intolerance to it. That's just the way that I
mm,
word it.
yeah,
Um, but other than that, I just think that the whole thing, like, I don't think for me, I don't think there's any fault that can be found. And when you look
no,
at the 12 steps in order, that it leads you to this place of, by the end of the steps, you'll have had a spiritual awakening and you'll be able to pass this program on to other people. So ultimately, the point of being in recovery and going through the 12 steps is to be of service to others. I mean, like, that's amazing, and also like the world needs more of that. It really
yeah.
does.
Oh God, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from, mate. I do, and yeah, I kind of agree with you, to an extent. But obviously, in the 30s, that the research and everything was not as good. Um, the God thing, yeah, I think that could be a little bit. I agree, it can be a stumbling block. Um, it is something that you won't realise the kind of interpretation of it until you've been around for a few weeks and kind of start to get your head into the program properly. Then it becomes clear about what it is. But initially, when you're sitting in that first meeting and people start talking about God, um, well, people have said, haven't they? We thought it was a religious cult and all this, that, and the other. Um, I don't have a religious leaning. I don't do the Bible. Um, I have a faith, but I'm not religious. But that doesn't stop me having a faith, because I have a faith in a higher power. I have a faith in something greater than myself that has brought me to this point, because I couldn't do it on my own. I've had to have that guidance. And one of my favorite things is footsteps. Footprints in the stand. Well, where were you? Who do you think was carrying you? And
Yeah,
they've carried me. You know what I mean? They've certainly carried me at times.
yeah,
Um, but I don't do the religious side of it. I don't do, I'm not religious. I don't go to church. I don't do the Bible. Um, all religions kind of are based around a greater power, which they choose to call God, or whatever that particular religion chooses to call it. But when you look at it from whatever viewpoint you look at it, it's still a higher power
yeah,
that has just been labelled for whatever reason. But that's my my take on it. Um, I call it God because it's easy, because it's simple, and it just keeps it simple for me. Um, but I remember sitting in a meeting, and the guy was doing the main share, and he was talking about this higher power concept, and the God thing. And he was saying that, he was having trouble with this concept of God and all the rest of it. And he said something along the lines of his higher power was his dog, which, fine. But I did point out to him that dog was God backwards. Do you know what I mean? Um, and that was how he dealt with that. That was, my higher power and my family that have passed. My higher power, as you said, are the people in the meetings. My God, my higher power speaks to me through other people,
yeah.
particularly in the rooms. Um, and that's where I get a lot of my spiritual guidance from. You know.
Yeah, I can't agree more with everything that you just said there, really, to be honest with you. And if I had to get like really technical on it, I'd say that the like it says in the readings, doesn't it? And at the back of the big book in the spiritual experience, it says deep down in every single one of us is the fundamental idea of God.
Mm,
I feel as though, that spark of whatever God is, the higher power, whatever you want to call it, I feel like that spark of that creative force is within every human. And when you're in a meeting and you hear, like you hear what it is that you need to hear, that is your higher power talking to you through other people. And
mhm,
it goes back to the thing about like, your spirit or your soul, whatever you want to call it, being the talking the language of your emotions. Because if you actually think about a human being on a kind of like physical and metaphysical level, you've got obviously you've got the physical body, you've got the mind, which is your thoughts, but then you've got this other aspect to you, which is your emotions, which is intimately entwined with consciousness. Because for me, consciousness must, like, whatever consciousness is, and we all are conscious. Because if you meditate, like for example, if you're meditating and you manage to completely empty your mind of all thoughts, there's some part of you that's still aware of your body and also of your thoughts when your thoughts start up again. So
mm,
whatever that is, for me is like, your soul. But that is where your emotions come from as well. And as like an alcoholic is like your emotions give rise to thoughts. So you start feeling these things, and then you start thinking about your emotions. And then once those thought patterns get out of control, and like what we call the washing machine head, you then try
Mm.
to medicate yourself with whatever it is, whether it's alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever. And then that thing works for a certain amount of time until it stops working, and then you move on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing until you reach a point where nothing works anymore. Like just nothing is doing the job. And ultimately, at that point, people either kill themselves or they end up in a psychiatric hospital or they end up coming into recovery.
Yeah.
And that's the way that I think about that's the way that I think about people and I think about addicts. I mean, like we were talking before about Buddhism. So, like 2,500 years ago, this guy goes off on his spiritual journey and, ultimately at the end of it becomes the enlightened one, the Buddha. But the first of his Four Noble Truths that he um, wrote, well, that he taught people was that life is full of suffering and that the
Mm.
cause of all that suffering is basically craving and desire. Well, that to me is like, that just ticks every box for us, doesn't it? I mean, craving and desire is just literally like we are to the nth degree we crave and desire things as addicts.
Yeah.
Um, and then he says the good news is that that there can be an end to the suffering, and it gives you this program to follow to be able to end the suffering. But as an addict, when I look at that program, I just say, well, it would be impossible for me to follow that program unless I've put all the addictive substances down first. And essentially,
Mm.
that's same as our program, isn't it? It's like you can't work the 12 steps, you can't go through the 12 steps if you're still drinking or you're still using. You have to have put those things down in order to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because like you said, you have to clear the mind.
Yeah,
The you, that mind altering chemical has to be your head has to be free from that mind altering chemical.
yeah,
Because the the clue's in the name, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? Anything that you put into your system or anything that you do, as you say, to kind of alter that thinking or alter the chemical balance of your brain, whatever that may be, you can't realistically do what you want to do if that's still floating around up there and kind of twisting the little the little things that it twists and
yeah,
inhibiting the things that it inhibits.
yeah.
Once you clear of that, then you can start rebuilding the paths to the proper thinking and the patterns and the paths that you need to kind of be using.
Well, that brings us nicely back to the point at which you were at in your rehab. So you've been through your step 4 and 5 and had this relief. What happened from there?
I just threw myself into it. The first 4 or 5 years, really, um, I just threw everything I got at it. 4 or 5 meetings a week, um, a lot of service, a lot of service. And I think that was one of the things that kind of gave me such a strong foundation is the amount of service that I did in those first 4 or 5, maybe longer than that, even to be honest with you, John, years. One of the first things I did, obviously making the tea, making the coffees, and all that sort of stuff, and emptying the ashtrays because you could smoke in meetings then, and all of that sort of stuff. But then I got involved with the Birmingham Convention, and I was actually part of the entertainment at the second Birmingham Convention down in Penn's Hall. There's myself, Dave M, and another Dave. Um, we were the entertainment. We were on white tuxedos and red dicky bows. I've got a photo somewhere of me, Dave M, and this other guy, all dressed in the white tuxes and the red dicky bows, just kind of, and we put it on ourselves, all members of AA just doing different things on the stage, and and that was at the second convention, and that for me was really something quite special, for somebody that had only been around for 12 months, to be able to do that and give back in that way. And then obviously, um, treasurer of the meetings, secretary, literacy secretary, then on to intergroup and do some work with intergroup, and the stuff that I did there. I think that in itself was one of the biggest foundation stones of my recovery, because you've said it already. It's about that giving back.
Well, that was exactly. I
I
mean,
got into
what you just said then was identical to my first like 4 or 5 years. Like I did all the same things that you just said then, and was like because my background was in DJing, I was like DJing at the Christmas parties for AA and NA and stuff,
yeah,
and just yeah, go like just going to conventions, just being of service as much as
yeah,
possible. And like you said, it gives you such a foundation for recovery.
mm, yeah. But the thing about it is, the more service you do, the kind of wider you spread yourself, I suppose. The more people you meet, and the more people you meet, the more experience you're gaining, the more knowledge you're gaining, and it's about the learning process. And as I think I said this earlier, you know, it's all about learning different things, and opening your mind to different kind of things. And the one thing that I won't allow myself to do, I have an opinion. I've got an opinion on many things, but I won't allow myself to kind of be arrogant enough to think that that opinion is the only thing that it is. You know, somebody else will have another opinion, and somebody else will have a totally different opinion to the first two.
Yeah,
I'm quite happy to listen to all those opinions, and that helps me to grow,
yeah.
not just educationally but spiritually.
Yeah,
Because
I've had to learn that recent. I think very recently over the last few years, well, probably the last couple of years, I've really had to start learning that don't force my opinion on other people. Let them, just let people have their opinions. Don't think that your opinion is the right opinion. Even if you think that you're right, just try not to force that on others. And like I think especially since COVID, because COVID was so divisive, and everybody had opinions about the vaccines and this, that, and the other. And I became quite vocal on like social media and with my family and stuff. And it just didn't there was nothing positive that came out of it. It was like I had a bit of a fallout with a few people in my family. I think I fell out with people on social media, and it was like I didn't at the time. I thought I really needed to say the things that I was saying, and I really needed to say it like with fervor. But in hindsight, what you just said then really resonates with me now. It's like I can have an opinion, but I don't necessarily even need to share it anymore,
mm, mm,
and I certainly don't need to force it on other people.
mm. Well, yeah, I didn't get sober to not have an opinion. I didn't get sober to be shrinking violet. You know, um, and if I feel something needs to be said, I'll say it. But obviously, I've learned to say it in the right way, not in the wrong way, and to put it across in a kind of respectful way, and as you say, not force it on people. Just this is what I think, but what do you think? Kind of attitude. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Um, and again, that's one of the beauties of sobriety. It allows me to have the freedom of opinions, and as much as any other freedom that I've got today.
yeah,
Um, and again, it's part of my growth. It'll keep growing, and it'll keep changing. But that's what this is all about. It's not about me getting to a point where I think I've done it now. I'll just carry on doing it this way for the rest of my life, because that ain't gonna do me any good. That is not gonna help me personally, because I'm I'm at a point in life now where kind of big changes happening with retirement and things like that. You so a new chapter in life is kind of emerging for me, and that kind of door is opening up. It's a bit scary, yeah, I don't really know what the future will hold, in a lot of respects, apart from the fact that I'm gonna have a bit more time on my hands than I did before. Um, but I'm gonna enjoy the process, and I'm gonna enjoy learning about different things. I've already kind of looked at different kind of social club things like photography and things like that. You know, uh, this is my freedom, and this is what this program gives me, is that freedom. That freedom to choose anything I want to choose, and I mean anything. I can do anything I want today,
Mm.
providing I've got the means to do it. I know I've got the ability to do it, and I ain't hurting anybody, or causing anybody any suffering or pain. I can do anything I want today because of this program.
That's what I really like about you and our mutual friend Yvonne and other people that are like years and years ahead of me in recovery, that you share what you just shared then, that like it's not like you've not arrived. Like David M as well always shares this, doesn't he? Like, I've not arrived anywhere. I like this is a program of continual growth, and it's not like you've reached this kind of like place in your personal life or in your spiritual life where you're like, right, I am in this place now and I just stay there. It's like you just continue to learn and grow and just get better basically. And like you said earlier on, you still put rocks in the bag and you have to get the rocks out of the bag.
Yeah.
And that's what I like. I like to hear that because I'm exactly the same. Like I never want to reach a place where I think, right, I've sussed it now, and I have done that. There's definitely been times when, like in the last 15 years, where I've gone, oh, I've sussed it now, like, and then literally a week later, I'm feeling absolutely terrible.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Well, we were talking earlier about something, and the name George Harrison came. Oh, we were talking about spirituality and the soul, and I'm a big Beatles fan, and particularly my favorite Beatle, I think, is George Harrison. Lennon is a legend, I think that's just a given. But I think George Harrison, for me, from the point of a spirituality point of view, a spiritual pathway point of view, if you look at what he, the kind of the road that he followed, and things like that, and there's one, the legend has it that when he died, and I so want this to be true, but I can't. I obviously have no way of kind of corroborating it. Um, but it's said that when he died, you actually physically, it was that spiritual that you actually saw his soul leave his body. His family actually saw his soul leave his body, his spirit leave his body when he passed. And I'd love that to be true. I suppose it's apocryphal, but I would love that to be true, because I have so much respect and admiration for the man. And if you look at some of the stuff that he wrote, particularly on the Cloud9 album, that's all about AA and about recovery and about the spiritual journey. And a lot of the songs that he wrote were about this spiritual journey. But then you just talking there about, what Yvonne and Dave and the rest say, and it's like a magical mystery to, get on a coach and you don't know where you're going, and you kind of reach it. I've just got off the one coach and I've just got onto another one, mate, and I'm off again now, and I don't know where I'm going, but I know it'll be great. I know it won't be without its issues, and I know there'll be, at some point there'll be painful things to deal with, because that's life. Life doesn't stop throwing the punches just because Mark got sober. Um, but I'm going to enjoy the journey, and if it does throw a few punches, I've learned to roll with them now. They don't put me down, and if they do, I can get up on the 9 count today. I can roll with the punches a little better than I ever could. And I know that whatever life throws at me, something or somebody within this fellowship will guide me through it.
What would you say that life in recovery means to you?
Life, simple as that. It's life. I have a life that I shouldn't have. I have a life that um, I got a second bite of the cherry, and not everybody gets that. Just recently, in the last week, a friend of ours who was suffering from the illness died because of it. You know, we tried to give him the guidance and the carry the message. Well, I obviously tried to carry the message, but he wasn't in a point where he was willing to accept it or take it on board, and he passed away last Sunday because of this illness. Um, as sad as I am for that, I also have to think there, but for the grace of God. And the answer to your question is life, John.
Yeah.
I'm alive. I've reached 66 years of age. I don't know how, but I have. And that's what recovery is about. And recovery is about enjoying every minute of that. Every minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Even when it's hard.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What would you say
It's
like
about
what well, you're probably going to answer this question anyway, but what would you say is like what have you learned that is kind of like over those 36 years, if you had a couple of minutes to boil it down and just tell everybody like what you've learned in those 36 years, what would you say?
it would be very cliche, mate. It would be very much textbook, I think. Um, living the day, keeping the day, um, enjoy the day, enjoy the moment. What did I say? Uh, Yesterday's history, tomorrow's a mystery. The day is a gift. That's why they call it the present.
Yeah, it's lovely that, isn't it?
And that's it for me, mate. Yeah, you have to plan. You have to we have to plan because that's life on life's terms. Um, but just enjoy the moment and don't lose sight of all the gifts that we have around us that we take for granted sometimes, and the things that we are given, we are blessed with, that we take very much for granted sometimes, because they're there for a reason. They're there because we are clean and we are sober. They wouldn't be there if we were if we were still addicts. You know,
What would you say to somebody that's still struggling with it that might be either still completely in the madness or they're just at that point where they need that nudge?
stick at it and be open-minded about what's on offer. Don't don't close your mind to what could be if you actually become willing and honest enough to want to accept it. I suppose just stay with what people are giving you. Keep with what people are giving you, because it will, or it can, get better. But you've got to want it. You have to want it. you
Yeah.
know. Um, and as an addict, as a recovering alcoholic, in the madness, somewhere deep within me, I did want it. Somewhere deep, deep down, underneath all that shit that I piled on top of it, I did want it. I just needed to find it. You know,
Yeah.
I had to dig deep. I had to really dig deep inside to find that I did want it. And you could have a 3rd of February 1988 if you just have that open-mindedness about the fact that that willingness is there somewhere, because the madness, the insanity of this illness is that it tells you haven't got it. It tells you that you are not ill when you know, and this is where the torment comes. You know you are. You know you're suffering because of what you're doing to yourself, and because of whatever it is that you're putting into your system or using to kind of alter your, you know, alter your thinking, alter your mind. Um, but you know, and that's, as I say, this is where the torment comes for me. You know that what you're doing is not right, is going to kill you. Um, and deep down you want to stop it. You know, let that deep down come through.
And I think that's the language of the soul. I think that that's what we were talking about earlier. I think that
Absolutely.
whether you want to call it the inner voice or whatever it is, the thing that ultimately comes from your soul signaling to you that you're killing yourself, and
Mm.
you're just very blessed if that comes to you in a thought or in a voice like you heard it. You know, in my case, it was overhearing my girlfriend telling me that she was going to leave me if I didn't stop drinking, and that was kind of, then I went down back into the room and prayed, and whatever it is, however it comes to you. But the like you said, the that flicker of life, really, it's life, isn't it? Life is the life within, the life force within you. Call it the elan vital, don't they? I think that's like the Latin, the life force, whatever that is. It talks to you, and when you get sober and you're no longer numbing out that voice or avoiding it, it becomes very loud, and it just, you, and I'm sure you have this all the time, but I was talking recently about how it just tells me what to do. you
Yeah.
know it's not a voice, it's just a feeling of just like, don't do that, do that. And it's just literally that.
Mm.
It's and when I follow it, my life just flows and it's all good. And then when I go against it,
It
it
becomes
say again.
it becomes instinct.
Yes. Yeah.
It becomes instinctive.
Yeah.
You know, it we call we call it gut feeling sometimes.
Yeah.
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 That's lovely. Well, thank you very much, mate. It's been an amazing conversation. I've really appreciated your time, and
No,
I'm
thank you for asking me.
glad we got to talk.
Yeah, no, it's been good. I enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed it.
Brilliant, mate. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.